We are here today with Marc LaFrance, and Marc has been involved in the music industry for over 4 decades. He's a well-known and highly regarded industry professional. He's performed as a drummer, singer, producer, songwriter on over 100 albums, has done countless recording sessions and live performances. Some of his present and past accomplishments include being the drummer and singer for Bachman and Turner and Randy Bachman since 2009. And he performed with Bachman and Turner in the Will Ferrell movie, The Campaign. He's the drummer and singer with the band Cease Desist. He has recorded with a vast array of prominent artists, including Crowcuss, Chilliwack, Payolas, Loverboy, Trooper, Prism, Shari Ulrich, Bruce Miller, Straight Lines, Glass Tiger, Long John Baldry, Alice Cooper, Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, Cher. I have to take so many breaths to get through this list, Marc. Carly Simon, Blue Murder, The Cult, David Lee Roth, Scorpions, Black Veil Brides, Michael Bublé's Christmas in New York, and many, many others. Marc's Kid Songs project has he's written and produced over 100 tracks for Scholastic Books, which is one of the largest book publishers in North America. The music is part of a kindergarten through grade 6 educational book and CD that was distributed nationwide. He's written several articles for renowned book publisher McGraw-Hill Ryerson for high schools. He's performed on several tracks for the internationally renowned Guitar Hero video game. He's the music supervisor and performer for the animation project Cackleberries. He formed Delinquent Records in 1994 with the release of his first solo album, Out of Nowhere, produced by Paul Dean of Loverboy. And Marc himself produced several albums at the Warehouse Studio, which is Bryan Adams' studio. In the Eye, The One Inside, and Let Me for the Polish rock band. Oh, how do you say that, Marc?
Kamia.
Songs went to the #1 position on Polish radio. And he has served as a board member on a bunch of big music institutions, but we're going to get to those a little bit later, so I'll save that part.
Ooh, man.
Thank you for joining me today, Marc.
I guess I better retire. I've just done too much stuff.
You've been a busy, busy man.
Yeah, I kind of never stopped. I've never been like I take time for vacation now and then, but,
Yeah.
And I love spending time with my family, but I just love doing all aspects of the music biz.
Yeah.
I've never been shied away from trying anything because I think to be involved in this industry, you have to wear 5 gazillion hats if you're going to make a living at it. So
isn't that the truth? Right?
Yeah.
It's that's a I think in most creative pursuits that can really be the case, that you just have to be willing to do a lot of different things.
Yeah, and you can't be afraid to work. And I don't know, I just find no matter what project you get involved with, you just try and do the best you can and put in the hours to make it work. And lo and behold, you can have a career before you know it.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, you and I have actually known each other since I was you know what?
You know, I've known you when you were in diapers. You can edit that out if you like.
You're not the first guest to say that. That's
I know. Little Mountain Sound was with GGRP was just that's how I kind of broke in. I moved to Vancouver in 1980 after being in Crowcuss and traveling across the country, and we had a #1 hit in Guatemala. Got a crate of bananas for royalties for that.
Woohoo!
But then I think I moved to Vancouver right around July of 1980.
Yeah.
And I had a meeting with Brian I think it was Brian. There's 2 Brians, right? Brian.
Yeah, Gibson and Griffiths.
Brian Griffiths. And he got me in there like 2 days after I moved in there. I was doing doing sessions. So it was really quite a remarkable.
Wow.
And then of course the whole scene just exploded. So
yeah, in my recollection, I may be exaggerating, but to me, like, you were the guy. I think you were the high male voice on every record that ever got recorded in Little Mountain Sound.
I did get the good fortune of, I mean, you know, timing is everything. And I think my timing was just, it couldn't be better, but a little bit of luck there, little timing, little luck. It all kind of works out, right?
I also happen to remember coming to your house as a child. Your then wife would cut my mother's hair and I would babysit your daughter.
That's right. Danielle. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something.
So do you want to flesh out your story at all for our listeners who this might be their first introduction to you? Tell us a bit about your journey. I know we just touched on it briefly, but your journey and, you know, how you got where you are today.
Sure. It's basically I grew up in Winnipeg, which was a pretty amazing time for the music industry in Canada, well, the world. I mean, I was like 9 years old, like so many people my age, saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, and it was like, whoa, you know, all the girls were freaking out, and I went, I'm going to do that. That's the job. That's what I want to do. And I did. I never, you know, from that day forth, I just set out, you know, started banging on pots and pans and destroyed a bunch of my mother's pots and pans, of course. And then eventually there was a guy down the street, Jake Tapashaner, who is about 6 years older than me. And he was like the guy in the neighborhood that had drums, single guy. And we'd all hang out under his window and listen to him as he played the Beatle records. And I was lucky enough with another guy to actually be invited in to watch him play. And we became kind of friends.
Yeah.
And he started teaching me how to play drums. And him and another bass player had a band started. And they couldn't find a guitar player. So Jake, who was teaching me, who was the drummer, started playing guitar. And he said, listen, Mark, don't get any ideas. You're going to be the drummer till we can find a guitar player. Well, that never happened. And then there was another gentleman. There was like a band house where this guy had different bands he was playing with. And again, the kids in the neighborhood hung out in front of this house.
Yeah.
And he would let me play on the drums of the different drummers that came in there. And then there was a point in time when he kind of stopped having bands there, but he took me and another guy downtown and he bought a set of drums. Because I come from a family, you know, we had 7 kids in the family. There's no way my parents could afford to buy me drums.
Yeah. It's not an inexpensive instrument.
No, it's not. Yeah. So he bought these drums and he bought the other guy a guitar. He said, look, you learn how to play these. They're yours. The other kid never learned how to play the guitar, but I got these drums. And then Jake and I partnered to buy a set of Ludwigs together. And lo and behold, I was in a band, you know, and it just kind of grew from there, you know, playing high schools and making $30 a night. But it was like amazing. And then, of course, being from Winnipeg, the Beatles were the rage. Winnipeg was amazing. It had to be 200 bands happening in Winnipeg at that time.
Yeah.
And one of the bands from my city, Winnipeg, the Guess Who made it.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden you went, they were great, but you go, I can do that, you know?
Yeah.
So it just sort of, everything just, you know, and then of course, full circle, years later, I ended up being in Randy Bachman's band. So it was kind of fun. And I did, my first recording act was Crowcuss, and we had 2 ex-Guess Who members. So that was kind of like the beginning of the journey that led to moving to Vancouver eventually, and just sort of having the good fortune of having a recording deal with Stony Plain Records, which was a small independent at the time.
Yeah.
Holger Peterson was amazing. And we had 2 albums, and it just it's just everything you do. It's amazing how something else comes out of it.
Yeah.
Just because you did that one thing, and everything sort of interweaves together. So
I think those things of like one opportunity building out of another, those absolutely happen when you're open to them.
Yes.
When you have a really like predefined version of here's where I'm going, here's the road to success, and it only happens in this one straight path. I'm not sure if those, and you're like, you know, hardcore to stick to it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if those same opportunities present themselves. I think it's really key to be that you have to be receptive to them.
Plus, I never ever had a plan B.
Yeah.
I was just bent on doing this no matter what, and I kind of loved every bit of it. Even I know there are a lot of guys couldn't handle the traveling.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, back in the day when I started playing, you had a van.
Yeah.
And you packed your equipment in with a van. There were 4 of us, and we'd go and do a gig in DePaul, Manitoba, which was like a 12-hour drive away.
Mm-hmm.
And guys would lie on
the monitors,
on the equipment, and the 2 guys, you'd sort of rotate.
Yep.
And then you get there, you do the gig, and as soon as you finish, you make, like, at the time, like I said, 30, 40, 50 bucks. This was back in the early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
You'd hop in the van and you drive back home.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, I have to say your sort of childhood origin story of that community and somebody really coming in and saying, I'll provide the gear.
Yeah.
I will provide the opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
That context, that is a piece that you don't hear very often. That's a little magical piece of your story.
Yeah, it was kind of magical the way it all kind of came together.
Yeah.
And both of these guys, Glenn Lusinger, the guy that bought me the drums, he ended up being in my first band, and he was like 10 years older, and he was just such a between Jake Tapashander and then of course I had amazing bands that I ended up playing with. My dearest friends, still my best friends, lived in Dallas, Texas, Craig Troop and
mm-hmm.
Rob Lang, that I ended up playing in bands with these guys, and we're still the dearest. A lot of these people are still very close friends of mine. Unfortunately, Glenn passed away, but I mean, it was it's just amazing. I had the good fortune to be connected with really smart and bright people that were older than me, but actually I learned so much from being around these people. I ended up learning the business.
Yeah.
And later on, even with Crowcuss, Herman Froome, who was one of the piano players, was very, taught me how to do books, so I learned how to do proper books and so that, which isn't, when I was president of Music BC, I go into schools and they asked me to do little, go in and talk to the music class or whatever. And first question I asked, does anybody know anything about accounting? And they look at me like, what? I thought, it's, rock and roll, woohoo, party. I says, no, it's the music biz. If you don't understand
Hallelujah.
the nuts and bolts of your industry, you're not going to have a career.
Yeah.
And because it's a complex industry. I mean, how many stories have you heard where guys have been hugely successful, but they didn't understand song publishing, they didn't understand neighboring rights, they didn't understand the mechanics of the industry, and they left it up to a manager
who screwed them,
who totally screwed them, and excuse my French, but fucked them over.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's interesting. I've had a couple of guests on where we've done interviews that have been much less about the performance side of music and much more about the actual fact that as musicians, we are entrepreneurs. We are business owners.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we are. Self-employed people.
And you got to have skills.
And if you don't, you're going to, you have to have it's kind of like a puzzle.
Yeah.
All the little pieces. And if I kind of look at myself as a journeyman, because I was like, I still I just got off a road trip 2 days ago. I playing with an Eagles tribute band, which I've got to study all of, Don Henley's vocals and his drumming style and stuff. So you never stop learning, right?
Yeah.
And then, the week before or a couple of weeks before that, I was on a boat cruise playing with Roger Daltrey and, with Randy Bachman, with all these other.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up being at all these different levels. And then a couple of weeks from now, I'll probably be playing at a little shithole bar just to keep in shape.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. And I appreciate that. And I think it's worth sort of pointing out that even when you get to a point in your career when you are playing with the Roger Daltrys and Randy Bachmans and whatever, yeah, you are still sometimes taking the gig that's the shithole bar because
exactly
it keeps your chops up. It keeps you in shape.
Exactly. It's like going to the gym. That's the way I look at it. You may go, you're not gonna, you get a token amount of money, but it's like you gotta keep playing. You can't if you take too much time off, you lose your calluses as drumming.
Yeah.
And singing, you gotta keep, it's a muscle, so you gotta keep working it all the time. And it's always, voices are always a challenge at the best of times.
Yes, they are.
I remember years ago, because we used to watch Merv Griffin, because he was a professional singer at one time, and he said that he didn't like it because he said every morning you wake up, to check and see where it's at.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Yeah.
And actually, we will come back to the vocal piece of it in a little bit, but let's, like, on this show, on the Vocal Lab, we're aiming to kind of shine a light into the industry through the lens of what I know now that I wish I'd known then.
Absolutely.
For those of us who've been doing it for a minute.
Yeah.
With that in mind, if you were starting your career all over again, is there anything you'd do differently?
Well, I mean, what I love about today is that there's, with the internet and all of these different, like shows like you have, there's so much that you can learn that you couldn't do when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Basically, how did you learn? You put on a record player, like, and put it on with a scratchy needle and wrote down the lyrics, tried to figure out the drum parts. And of course, being a young drummer, you'd be learning the drum parts incorrectly because you didn't realize they were overdubbing. So you'd be trying to play cowbells and everything at the same time. And you thought that that's the way they did it, right? So, I mean, definitely the tools of today are a definite advantage compared to when I started playing. They looked at me like I was an idiot. You're not going to make money doing music, because nobody was really making money back then. You basically did it for the love of it. Whether I don't know. It's sort of you always have a path. So yeah, I mean, if I had the good fortune of having the tools that they have today, I would have used them, obviously, but. I don't know, when you look back, I'm not a revisionist of, I guess. I sort of look at the path that I've taken and yeah, I'm sure there's things that I would have loved to have changed, well, in personal life, for sure. But we won't get into that.
No, but without necessarily getting into the details, it's worth acknowledging that
it's hard on relationships.
It's hard on relationships.
Sure it is,
and
because
your career does not exist in a vacuum. It absolutely impacts your relationships and your personal life, and vice versa.
And it's tough to be doing what we do.
Yeah.
It's, some people think just, my wife, Dorota, she came to the Junos one time, and it was quite funny because she can't get over how musicians love to talk about, because so what's the worst thing you can say to a musician is, so what are you up to? Well, there you go. You got an hour's We love to talk about ourselves, and sometimes it could be, I don't know, whatever. I guess that's the way we self-promote. That's how we've gotten work. Nobody wants somebody who, oh, gee, I'm not that good. You're not going to get much work if you do that, right? So
yeah. It's funny, actually, when I started this show, and my husband was like super excited about it. He was telling all our friends and family about it. And he brought it up at one point and he said, well, babe, like, tell them what you're doing. And I sort of, well, I'm going to start a little podcast. And I didn't super duper sell it. And he said, you have to get way better at like selling yourself, at making that, a thing. And it's exactly what you're talking about. It's the self-promotion aspect, and it's a real thing.
And you have to be able to do it. But I mean, I know that, you have to be able to do it in a certain way that it doesn't come off like you're a narcissist. And in our industry, there's a lot of guys, people just start to believe their own bullshit.
Press. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Isn't that the truth? So looking backwards, we spoke to what you might or might not do differently. Is there anything in particular that you would pull out that you would make sure to do the same all over again?
I mean, I wish I would have taken more theory and, maybe
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I play a little piano, I play a little guitar, but I wish I would have done maybe a bit more of that,
Mm-hmm.
because that would have probably helped. Because the more you know about music, the better you can be at your craft. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, now in my later years, you know, during the pandemic, I just started practicing guitar. I mean, I'm not going to be good enough to be able to play, but at least good enough to be able to sit with my Logic and write tunes and that type of
Yeah.
thing, right? And then hire good players or collaborate with good players to be able to play the parts properly.
I think that's actually, I talk to my students about that sometimes. For me, when I was doing a lot of writing, I don't do much writing anymore, but when I was doing a lot of writing, because I played
Yeah.
piano growing up, and, I was never any kind of concert pianist, but I certainly played well
Mm-hmm.
enough, and that was fine. And then I got to a point where I felt like I was writing the same thing
Yeah.
over and over again, you know? And so I started playing guitar. And because I understood music,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I could apply it into a new instrument relatively quickly.
Yes.
Like I didn't have to start
Mm-hmm.
music all
Yeah.
over again. I just had to learn
Yeah.
chord shapes
Yeah.
under my hands, right? But what it did is having a new instrument in my hands absolutely changed what I was writing.
Absolutely. Because piano, you can't help it. It's a little bit more melodic because you just sort of,
Mhm.
in guitar, you can get the power chords happening, so you can rock it up a bit, and
Yeah, yep.
so it's
Yeah. So I think different instruments do influence the way we write, and it can be worth picking up a new instrument even if you're only ever going to be shitty at it. Just enough to write.
because it sends you down a different pathway, which
Yeah.
is yeah,
Yeah. So that actually brings up a good point, Mark. You talked about your theory
yeah,
background. So uh like in this industry, obviously we see some people who are super formally uh
yeah,
educated in music, and some people who have no formal education and they're doing it all by
yeah.
ear, and then we have got everything in between. Where do you sort of fall on that spectrum?
I kind of fall somewhere in the middle. I mean, I can read enough to get by, but my
Yep.
ear has always been, I've always been good with my ears, so
Yep.
it's helped even in some of those sessions. But I was fortunate when I started doing the sessions that, like in GGRP, there were people like Peter Clark and your mother,
Yep.
who is amazing, that helped me. I mean, these people, they were like,
Yeah.
took me in. I mean, I know a lot of other people, singers would come in and they, right away whether you fit in, but they just brought me into the fold, and it was like it was that magical, right, to be around all of these amazing singers. And
Mhm.
I mean, I started doing sessions in Winnipeg, and I remember you go in and they pay you $50 per spot. So I go and I play
Mhm.
drums and I'd sing, do backgrounds or whatever. And you do 5 spots and I'd make like, I don't know, 600-700 bucks or whatever it was at the time. I went, whoa. And then I came to Vancouver and I got on my first ACTRA, union. And it
Yeah.
was like, when I got the first checks I got from that, it was like, whoa. It was all of a sudden, it was
Yeah.
like it was like a whole different reality. And those were such magical years,
Yeah. They really were.
with you had the sessions happening for the jingles. So I'd be sitting in the lobby, and then of course Bob Rock and,
Mhm.
started happening, and Bruce Fairburn, and you'd be sitting waiting to do a jingle, and Bob Rock would walk through and say, "Hey, Mark, can you do some backgrounds for me next work? I'm, doing an album with Bon Jovi or whatever it was."
Yep. Yep.
And you go, "Yeah, okay." And then you'd be sitting doing uh, in the lobby there, waiting to working on that. It was the Cult album, actually, that particular day. Then the next day you'd be doing that, and your dad would walk by, "Mark, can you come in? We're doing an A&W spot tomorrow. Yeah. So I'd start just going, because they had the little lunchroom there. Some days I just drop in and have lunch and I get a gig.
Well, there was, I mean, that really was that magical, like the advertising, like the production company upstairs, and then the recording studio downstairs. And when the recording studio, Little Mountain, when it started to branch out and actually be doing
album projects,
album work as well as the jingle work, it was just this match made in heaven. And it was happening at a time when there was so much music in advertising, which doesn't happen that way anymore.
And I know it, unfortunately that changed. And the thing was too, is because all of us had gotten our chops from doing singing on the ads and stuff, including the engineers. So you hear, Bob Rock and Mike Fraser, all of these guys ended up they knew how to mic an orchestra. They knew they learned their craft from doing the jingles. So then because we were in there every day. So a lot of these bands would come in, the bigger bands, and they were in the studio every 2 years or something. So it's not the same as we were in there every year, so we could go in and just get stuff done quickly. And that ended up saving. So it was quite a nice connection between both of those. It just was magical the way it all kind of fit together.
Yeah, that's true.
I do have a funny story though. When I first moved to Vancouver, I knew Paul Dean. I knew because I did a lot of work with the Loverboy guys. I met them back. Paul Dean and I go back to when he lived in Winnipeg and he was in a band called Scrubble O'Kane. So we were friends from way back then. And he invited me down to the Cave to see Loverboy. And there was a young kid that was starting up, Brian Adams, who I met before this, or because he was doing jingles too. He was coming in and we were singing jingles together. And anyway, this guy comes up to me. I just moved in. He says, "Hey, Marc LaFrance." Says, "Yeah, man, I saw you playing, at the Commodore with Warming Up God. I love your drumming, love your singing." And we chatted. I think we had a drink together. And I've always been careful to be nice to people and it was Bob Rock.
Yeah.
So, and I use that as a story a lot of times with young musicians saying, no matter what level you're at, don't think your head is that big that you can't give people the time of day because you don't know who you're talking to. And I use that example as a guy who gave me a lot of work. And if I had been a dickhead, I would have, there's no way he would have hired me later. So I think it's very important to if you want to have a career, to treat people properly, no matter who you are, if you don't know them as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a business that is built on, well, I mean, like a lot of businesses, but I think that people don't necessarily perceive the music business to happen this way, but it's a business that's built on relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you learn how to fit in with people, and that's personality, I think, is a big thing, is an important factor for sure. Because you're on the road with a band. Do you really want to be working with people that are, not nice? Can't. We've all been there at times, and it's not a it's not a fun thing to be on stuck with somebody who's not a good person. Or
abrasive personalities are abrasive personalities.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
So you have one of those like truly amazing high rock voices, male rock voices. Like I've seen you sing AC/DC, like just, it ain't no thing. And so I would like to know, what do you do in terms of caring for your voice? It's lasted you 4 decades and you're still going strong. I heard you sing a month ago and it was great. So what do you do?
A big part of my regime is health. Like I go to the gym 5 days a week. And my wife Dorota is very health, like the food that we eat. And so we're very, very conscious of, but I try to stay as healthy as possible because obviously being a drummer is very physical.
Yeah.
And, singing as well is obviously physical. So I try, and I do vocal eases and warm ups before I hit the stage. And but as you get older, you got to be careful because it does, your voice does change as you get older, so you have to readjust the way, and just, I think, just trying to be real conscious of how your voice feels, when you should push it, when you shouldn't.
Yeah.
So, and it I mean, it does. I mean, I'm performing all the time. So between live and then I've had the good fortune, I got my Logic. So I still do a fair amount of studio work from my home. I'll do vocals for people all over the world. They go, ends up being a really good part of my income as well. Just from having done big records, people still go, "Oh, are you the guy that sang on this?" And I go, "Yeah." And they go, "Oh, would you like to sing on my album, like backgrounds or whatever?" So it's and I think doing the studio stuff, you get to know because you really, it's like a microscope. So you get to know what works and what doesn't just from spending as much time doing studio and live. They kind of can interconnect to be able to, although being live is immediate, you don't get a chance to redo a line.
Yeah, that's true. But it is interesting the way the pandemic really shifted the landscape
it sure
of
did.
studio work. There was already some of that, at home work happening, but it really shifted things. And I think a lot of that has stayed shifted where you will get sent stuff and you do it in your home studio and send it back. It's funny. I was talking to Saffron Henderson about this element, and she was talking about the fact that it's great for the convenience of it, but nobody's producing you, so you have no feedback.
That's true. Although there are some great new programs. There's a program that I've been dabbling with called Session Wire.
Somebody just told me about that.
Yes,
actually,
where you can actually you can work with different people, because then it's very, and you can send them, you can work with them right in real time. So you can have somebody producing you. But there's also that, when you used to go to the studio, and I remember I love that part of it, the camaraderie and seeing people.
Yeah.
The community. Because now it's just, that part of it has kind of disappeared. And I don't know how some of these young artists are able to, I guess maybe because of the internet, and also because of the being able to communicate like we are right now. And like with Session Wire, you can have a number up to quite, maybe 7 people working at the same time on this.
Yeah.
So
but it's different. It's a very different thing, because I think, for people who do a lot of session work, whether that's voiceover, like spoken stuff, or whether it's singing stuff, those people that you would hang out with in the studio, that was your peer group.
Yeah.
You learned from them. Those were your friends. That was your, and that all got taken away, and it became so isolated.
Yes.
That it had a big impact in a way that I didn't see until it was hindsight.
Yeah. For me, when the pandemic happened, it was because I never gotten into recording at home, because I was always so busy.
Yeah.
Going to studios, going on the road.
Yeah.
And it was one of these things that, I'll do that. You always put it off. And then finally, after watching TV for a month, I went, okay, I got to do something. So that's when I started dabbling with Logic, and then I was doing sessions and recording stuff with other people, and I was writing tunes, and I was putting songs out on my label, just not for success, just because I enjoyed doing it. And it did.
Yeah.
It kind of worked as an advertisement for me, because you're putting out stuff and people will hear it, and they'll go, if they like it, they'll go, oh, that guy, he's still doing stuff, so maybe he'll do something for me. So you end up getting work just because you recorded something, right? And that's the good thing with the social media. I like using Facebook and Instagram and the various social media to try and promote yourself still. I only use it for that reason. I try to keep my personal life out of it, and certainly don't do any politics.
Oh, good Lord, no.
Sitting there arguing with somebody you don't know that's halfway across the world about something you'll never agree on. It's like, it's a total waste of time as far as I see. But some people just, it's like a feeding frenzy out there on this kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think? I mean, speaking to that, we've come through in the arc of your career, we've had the landscape change shape a lot, right?
Oh yeah, but
So what do you think creates a career with longevity?
I think you have to be a chameleon.
Yeah.
You have to be able to change. Like, I mean, I've been doing, I know I said you were talking earlier that it's 4 decades. Scarily, it's more than 4 decades now. I guess I better read you my bio, but I'm gonna stay away from that, because then people go, this guy must be 80 years old or something.
I think it just says more than 4 decades. We can leave it at that.
Yeah. I think we'll leave it at that. But anyway, it's you basically have to continue to reinvent yourself. And I've just been fortunate because I've gotten gigs that are, I've been working with Randy for about 14 years, and different stuff comes up. And if you have enough of a career, you can continue building upon it. And so different aspects of your career can keep. I mean, there was a period of time when I was heavily involved in the politics of music. Like, I was the president of Music BC. I was on the National Advisory Board for Factor. I was on the Musicians Union Board, and I lobbied for neighboring rights, all of these different things. And I learned a lot about the mechanics of the industry. By, I think I did that for 15, 20 years in that. And it was a good thing to do, although it probably was a bit detrimental, because when I was doing the neighboring rights thing, I was in total disagreement with most of the record labels, because I was more pro the artist side and protecting the fact that, you're a guy in the trenches singing, and record companies were trying to cross collateralize to get everything so they'd pay you, and it wouldn't go through, let's, for instance, Actor Racks, where you get your royalties direct. And we fought really hard to prevent it from going through the record companies, because if it would have, we'd never see this money. And so by doing that, I pissed off a lot. I probably wasn't getting any record deals around that time, but so be it. Now, most of those guys, some of the guys have passed away, I guess. So the guys that might have really hated me aren't around anymore. So I don't have to worry about it.
So time worked in your favor in the long run. But now I have a question, and I'm asking you a question for which I only have a sliver of the information. But I heard through the grapevine, so I very well could have this information wrong, is my point, that back in the day, in the Little Mountain days, that you managed to do a good job of like setting yourself up for the best long-term success in terms of negotiating deals where, I don't know if you got points on the record or if you got, but it like in maybe a different way than other singers did.
What I did is as much as possible, I insisted on it going through the musicians union. And the reason why I did that, because I knew enough about it at that time, because if it went through, especially their big labels, if it went through the musicians union, there was a file contract. And at the time, I kind of knew there was this neighboring rights thing, which, it's the right that neighbors songwriting and publishing. So when a song now, because it's been passed in law for I think it's been quite some time since it was passed into law.
And for those who are listening, we're talking about Bill C-32, right?
That's exactly what it, Bill C, which is essentially when a song gets played on radio and in gyms, as a person that performed on that record, if the record company gets 50%, the other 50% is split between the main artist, and I think 20% of the main artist goes to the side players like myself. And so that's how, you get that. And at the time, I kind of knew that might have, so I wanted to make sure I had a third party document that showed that I played. So a lot of those records that I sang on were like, Motley Crue, for instance. And then I did the side effect of that was you also, because you file a union now, when Motley Crue all of a sudden started using those songs like Kickstart My Heart in different movies and TV shows, I would get a reuse fee. And as soon as you get that reuse fee, it's like this magical thing kicks in to the musicians' film fund. So for the rest of your life, you get the film industry kicks in, I don't know, $46 million a year into this fund that's distributed amongst all of the people that have had, songs like, that, and you'll get your share forever of this money. And I remember actually Jim Valance was a guy that actually encouraged me in that way as well, because I did some sessions with him with 38 Special, and he always filed card. You didn't even have to ask him; he would do it. Right? And I still get money from Revenge of the Nerds 2 from 40 years ago. And it's not. A lot of it isn't necessarily huge, but if it becomes a numbers game. So the more so I was always very kind of meticulous about that, and Bob Rock and a lot of the producers, I'd always ask for that, and it was never a problem to do that. So,
and for those who are listening, what the alternative is, which was often commonplace, and I think actually still is often commonplace in session work, is you get a buyout, which so you just get like the session fee.
Yeah, you get a fee. Yeah, that's it, and that's it. But of course, now the fortunate thing is that if you register that song, at least you'll get the neighboring right? Because that doesn't matter. And but to have that added benefit, especially when you're dealing with major labels, they have the money, but and they're at the end of the day, the major label and the artist who you're working for, they're not going to be the ones that are paying you the money on this anyway. It's going to be the motion picture business or the producer of the movie, hot tub movie
machine
or whatever. It was, one of the.
So I mean, is that now when you say if you register the song now, you're talking about Actor Racks now?
Yes. Yeah. Well, Actor Racks is for like even if you do a session for anybody now. And even if it's not union, if you make sure that you do an invoice that shows you sang on it or whatever, you got to be able to prove that you sang on it. And they give you a credit. All you need is that credit on the record that said you sang on it, and then you just register with Actor Racks, and you're fine with that. You'll get your performance royalties throughout the world, depending how you set it up.
And it's an important thing because I mean I learned that the hard way because I sang on sessions and I didn't do those things and then went to register those things on Actor Racks and they kind of don't take my word for it that I sang on it.
No, you got to have. But if you have the credit on the album, that's all you need.
Right, but if it doesn't credit you specifically,
and sometimes some of these records that I sang on, they had, there was one band, I probably shouldn't say their name, but they, be like, I was singing, there's two other singers singing backgrounds in one side of Little Mountain Sound.
Yeah.
And then they were in the next studio posing around the microphone like they were singing the backgrounds. And all they gave us, but I had a union contract, so it wasn't a problem. I got still registered with the neighboring right and all the rest of it, but they give you extra special thanks. So they didn't even give you a credit for singing, but extra special thanks.
Yeah. So
because that was showbiz. They don't want to let anybody know that they didn't, they didn't sing on it. It's like, so the music industry can be a little bit like the circus or smoke and mirrors.
Yeah. That is so true. So true.
I mean, I'm sure there's still some of that going on to some degree. It's like you look at all of the movies.
Yeah.
Nothing to take away from the Motley Crue biopic or the Queen or any of these. You watch them, and they're great. They're good movies, but it's like it looks like the band did everything. There was no producer, there was no engineer, no other, it's just, it was them. They're sitting in the studio and they did it all. And we, hell, I've been in enough sessions to see that was never the case. It was, you had a guy that knew what he was doing behind the board, kind of calling the shots and babysitting, because that's what being a producer is, a glorified babysitter.
And I had Mike Fraser on here, and he was talking about the fact that as a producer, you really need to take some psychology courses, because you're just managing.
I love him. We've done a lot of work together, obviously, over the years, and actually used him as engineer with the Cameo album. We were in Sopot on the Baltic Sea recording an album with Cameo, a Polish band here. No, actually, Wojtek Balchum, who is the leader of the band, has become a real dear friend, and I'll be seeing him soon when I go visit Poland in the next in about 3 weeks. I'm going for a month, so it'll be fun.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, Mike's
he's sweetheart. Amazing. One of the best engineers I've ever worked with. He's just
truly, and the nicest guy as well.
But that's why he keeps working. If he was a dickhead, you got it. He knows how to. He took those psychology courses.
Yeah, right. That was Marc LaFrance, and there's even more where that came from, but you got to come back on Thursday, because Marc and I are going to talk about the organizations he's been part of to fight for artist rights, and some of the songs that he's sung on, and some of his, some more of his experiences in the biz. You're not going to want to miss it.